Johannes, tell us a little bit about your home life as you were growing up.
Well, I grew up in Eritrea. Eritrea, when I ask many people where Eritrea is, they wouldn't know. But Eritrea used to be part of Ethiopia. It's northeast Africa, right by the Red Sea coast. And I grew up in a small village. It's uh, a village where farming is the only occupation that people had, and my parents were farmers. So I grew up in this small village early on in my elementary schools. But to high school, I went to a boarding school in Asmara, which is the capital city of Eritrea. So that's where I grew up, the middle child of 9 children.
Nine
So
children. Wow.
absolutely. So when you're a middle child, you know what that means. You have to
Yeah.
be a negotiator.
So you know how to do that.
I know how to do that. I've
Okay.
learned, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the faith life of your family.
Well, my parents um, were Coptic Christians. In fact, as far as we can count in our ancestry, all my ancestors have been Christians. So probably it dates back to the fourth century um, of Christian history. Um, my parents then became Lutherans, and first my father, and then my mother. I do remember her confirmation, but I was the first child to be baptized in the Lutheran Church. My other four siblings, older siblings, were baptized in the Coptic Church, and then the other five of us were baptized in the Lutheran Church. As the home life was really very a life of worship. My parents didn't know how to learn how to read. My father self-taught to read the Bible, um, but really they loved to sing. So every night we would gather, and my mother sitting around us, and we'll sing our hearts out, and then conclude the day with a prayer. And that
My
was, yeah.
goodness. um, so tell us a little bit about what brought you to America. What was it that caused the move from Eritrea to the United States?
Well, growing up, I grew up right after the British. When the British left Eritrea, and Eritrea was under a federal agreement with Ethiopia, and at the end of a 12-year federal agreement, there was supposed to be a referendum for the Eritreans to choose whether to be an independent country or join Ethiopia. Before that happened, Emperor Haile Selassie, being a good friend with the Americans and with the British, they gave him the green light to really rig the referendum and really annex Eritrea. And that's what happened in 1961. I was 4 years old at that time. So in 1961, the movement for independence in Eritrea began. In fact, some of the founders of the Eritrean Liberation Front were Lutherans. One of them, who was very, very active in translating the Lutheran Chorale into the Tigrinya language, was one of the 7 leaders who probably were very instrumental in starting the Eritrean Liberation Front. So I grew up in this environment, um, and really after 14 years, this was 13 years, 1961, Emperor Haile Selassie was overthrown. And I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. There was a student movement, but everything was welling up and really um, uh, bubbling over and creating this really chaotic kind of movement. Haile Selassie overthrown, many of his cabinets were executed, um, and in 1995, the Eritrean movement really got into its height, and many of us young men and women joined the Eritrean Liberation Front. At that time, this was in 1995, um, about this time, 1975, Um, the Eritrean Liberation Front came into Asmara, started a war against the Ethiopians, and the Ethiopian army just went to the streets and started just killing every young person that they found on the streets. So my cousin and I had to leave Asmara, went back to our village, and from there I joined the Eritrean Liberation Front. So I was with them until first 96 till 1997, 77, and then from 78 until 1781, I was with the Eritrean Liberation Front. Our group was then pushed out of Eritrea. We went into a camp in the Sudan. It was a military camp for the Eritreans. And then from there, my friend and I left the camp and became refugees in the Sudan. From the refugee camp, of course, resettlement through the INS, Immigration and Naturalization Services of the U.S. I came to the United States in 1983.
Describe your early years here in the U.S.
Well, it's, I was one of those probably few who came to this country with a vision. First of all, when I was in the Eritrean army, I basically denied my faith, and I was a mini communist. But then went to the refugee camp in the Sudan, was brought back to faith through Swedish missionaries, and I was very active as an evangelist in the refugee camps. So while I was in the Sudan, I already decided to go into pastoral ministry. When I arrived in the U.S., I was introduced to the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod through the Swedish missionary, and I sought out the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and went straight to college. I came in June. I was in college in September. After that, it was a normal college life. Enjoyed going through Concordia College, Bronxville. In those days, I remember the college didn't have many black folks on campus. I was one of the few African Americans or someone who came from Africa, and things have changed now. Things have changed, but it was really overwhelming, dealing with new culture, but exciting also. Okay. Just envisioning the possibilities for ministry.
Okay. So it was college, seminary, pastoral ministry after that.
Yes.
Describe your first few forays into pastoral ministry. How did that work for you?
Well, Concordia Seminary, it's St. Louis. It was really exciting, but very, very tough. So we were very busy studying. But on the other hand, I had to also work and provide for myself and my family. So I really didn't have a whole lot of time to enjoy campus life when I was in St. Louis. I think the first very good glimpse that I got for pastoral ministry was when I went on my vicarage to St. John's Lutheran Church in East Moline, Illinois. And I remember at that time the Synod didn't have many African immigrants who went to the seminary and also through the system. So I heard President Bowman had to call the congregation to encourage them to welcome me. Went to St. John's, and when I heard, I said, well, that was not necessary. Got into St. John's. It was Richard Benke was the pastor of that congregation. Great guy. He was in the seminary, and from the seminary, as the dean of students, he took a call to St. John's. So he knew and understood seminary life. So he was really a great help for me in terms of adjusting into parish ministry, but also into the U.S. culture. But what was most important in that experience was the people. I really was able to learn that the gospel does break barriers. So even though the first few months were very challenging for them as well as for me, um, later on we developed a love relationship with the congregation, and I think I was just as effective as any of other vicar that they had before. So it was a great experience. And then from there, went to back to the seminary, of course, for my 4th year. And during that year, Dean Hempelman was the interim president for the seminary. He was the dean of the academic dean, and then Karl Barth left, retired, and he was the interim at that time. And I remember going to his office trying to find a congregation or a district that will call me to do Eritrean ministry. Because at that time, my vision was, it was very specific. I was going to go around the world, reach out to the Eritreans, and hunt them down wherever they are to tell them about Jesus. So that was really my vision. So we tried, and in fact, Dean Hempelman called the Southeastern District, where there are lots of Eritreans in the DC area, called the Texas District. There were Eritreans in Houston, and none of them came forward at that time. So the Council of Presidents decided to send me to Holland, Michigan. That was my call assignment as an associate pastor of Zion Lutheran Church in Holland. And it was just a great experience. What happened was, it was a congregation that has some conflicts, but regardless, for me, I say that was the real seminary training, was Zion Lutheran Church. After 2 years, I found myself being the solo pastor, and I had to deal with all the healing the congregation, take them through a mission consultation process, so that they deal with the real issues of the congregation, and at least have some kind of plan and vision for the future. And we did extremely well during those years, maintained the level of ministry that were before me, and really prepared them for a good transition. And that was before I left to go to Washington, D.C. to be the missionary at large to African immigrants. Yeah.
In the conversation so far, you've talked quite a bit about having the opportunity to move people into mission, to seek out the Eritreans and bring them the gospel. What influenced you to want so much to speak of Jesus with people? I mean, why isn't your faith more of a personal faith, but rather it's a missionary faith?
Well, first of all, I think my experience in the Eritrean Liberation Front, early on in life, I learned how movements work. And I realized that the leadership in the movement, how they communicate their vision to the people, does make a difference. And after having been there and going back to the church in the Sudan, I have that same kind of fervor where really this is the best message in the world that God has given to the people whom He has created. And it shouldn't be, it can't be contained in one person. So the person whose life has been changed through this gospel has the joy. It's not even an obligation for me, the joy to just share it with as many people as possible.
Okay. Before I ask you about your current role, I wanna ask you to look back over the many things that the Lord has privileged you to do. As you look back, what are you most thankful for that the Lord allowed you to accomplish and to do in your ministries?
I think the one single accomplishment that I really thank the Lord, and it's all by God's grace, was when I left parish ministry to be a missionary at large in the Washington-DC. I remember to this day when I had the interview with the Southeastern District, and Art Scherer and Preston Wagner were the mission executives at that time. They interviewed me, and this is what I told them. If your goal and your vision is for me to come and just plant one congregation that I would serve as a pastor, I told them I'm not interested. I'm not coming because I have a very comfortable life. The congregation I was serving was just a great congregation. They loved me. I loved them. So for me, there was no reason to leave. The only reason that I would want to leave that place was for me to be involved in a mission field, to reach out to people that are not connected. And at that time, I don't believe that they even knew what that meant. So they said, Yohannes, just come. So I went there, and this is the premise on which I began my ministry, was that I will work with multiple congregations, but I will not be the primary leader of any group, but raise up leaders to begin ministries in multiple congregations. And the Lord blessed it. Leaders kept coming, and we were encouraging congregations to reach out to the African immigrants. That was my focus at that time. So what this did was, it really encouraged it to the Synod, especially to the district, to look into a church planting movement in a different way, to do it the apostolic way, and not the addition kind of way, that you have this heavy emphasis in infrastructure and investing and bringing in a seminary graduate to start it. And if we do that, then what happens is it takes 8 years to develop the missionary, and at the end of the 8th year, they may lose all their passion for mission movement, and they wind up becoming traditional pastors. So I think that was the single most accomplishment or discovery, I would say, for my missionary thinking.
Just yesterday, you were installed as the Mission and Ministry Facilitator for Area B of the Texas District of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Big area that includes the urban center of Dallas-Fort Worth, plus some semi-rural congregations just to the east, and many rural congregations that extend far east from here as well. What is your hope and your dream and your vision as you begin to think about your role as mission and ministry facilitator for Area B?
Well, after I left St. Louis in 2010, after the synodical elections, I thought my missionary days were over. And I think my passion almost died at that event. So I turned down a couple of, in fact, about 3 potential calls to go into the mission field. I needed a break, so I went to this financial institution in Fort Wayne, Indiana, with the Lutheran Foundation, and Alamash and I thought that we were going to retire from Fort Wayne. But the 3rd year I started to get this tingling and this uncomfortable feeling that said, well, Yohannes, I think you have few more missionary years left, so you belong in the mission field. And all of a sudden this call came from the Texas district. And I have to tell you, about 6 months before the call, I got the call from the staff at the Texas district. I had this dream that I would be serving in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And when the call came, I said, absolutely, this is God calling. And I knew before they said, Yohannes, the call is extended to you, I knew God wanted me in this place. This is my vision for this place. I think the Texas district is one of the bright spots in our Synod. And I do believe that we could start a mission movement out of this place. A mission movement that is not only going to impact this area, but a mission movement that may really have a larger and wider impact in our nation. Because my hope and my prayer and my dream is that there will be a true mission movement in the United States of America, that people will know Jesus, and we'll have many more that will join our ranks, and hell will be depopulated, and the devil will be angry, and I will have a heyday.
Very
That
good,
how-
very
yeah.
good. So listen, could you see yourself doing anything but missionary, ministry type work?
No, I cannot imagine myself doing anything else but be engaged in mission. Even if I do anything else for a living, at the heart of what I do would be mission. When I was in Fort Wayne, I told you about this a need for getting a respite and staying away from ministry. I really didn't sit around doing nothing. I think we were able to organize an urban ministry strategy for the Fort Wayne. Fort Wayne is not a big city, but it's big enough that it has the urban realities, and the people in Fort Wayne as just unreached as the people here in Dallas and Fort Worth. So we did that. We engaged in revitalization and partnered with TCN, Transforming Congregation Network, and really helped some congregations to transform. So I thought I was going to get a rest, but I didn't rest. It was fun. I enjoyed it. And yeah, I wouldn't imagine myself doing anything else but be involved in mission.
True missionary with a missionary heart. Thank you for sharing your time and your experiences with us.
Thank you. Yeah.